I'm Drexley. Do not over-explain to people. Now, I'm saying that like that because it's not great telling you. Over-explaining turns to much more, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Over-explaining is when you think that you need to say this, this, and that because of you did something or you told somebody something that you think they didn't like. That turns into a lot more, and it honestly is what drives you away from making friends, keeping friends, or just thinking of yourself in some sort of way. Boundaries. Over-explaining makes your boundaries almost non-existent, and quite frankly ruins your, I would say, reputation in a way that makes people think that you're just being the victim over and over and over and over again. I've had problems with this in the past, and I've done this too, and it took me a very long time to get over the fact that you don't need to over-explain to people. You don't need to say why you did something to somebody, and you don't need to say why, you know, you did something. Leave it at that and go. Over-explaining is a bad habit, but it also turns into oversharing. Oversharing is even worse. Now your boundaries are gone. Your boundaries are gone. You're oversharing your life with a friend or family, and they just feel like they know you, and they can start pushing you around. They know your buttons, and they think that they know you. Oversharing is what over-explaining is like. Sorry. Over-explaining is like the little brother to oversharing the big brother. It's like basically beating you down, if you get what I'm trying to say. It's the worst version of over-explaining. And like I said, I've had problems with this before, and it's not good. It's literally not good. The one thing with over-explaining, which I will say, is that sometimes it's with an apology, and it comes after an apology. You know, why did you do something? Sure, it's okay to be like, you know, hey, this is why I did something. But then when you're constantly keeping it going and making it seem like you're defensive, that's a problem. Or, you know, you're over-explaining to somebody why you're sorry that you said this one thing. Then you seem like a pushover, and people can push you over. I think that's the one thing, and it comes from just you being a child, you know, not getting the attention or not being heard by people, friends, family, and it just stems from that. Regardless, it's still not good. Oversharing or over-explaining, especially the oversharing part. That's where your boundaries, like I said, they go, and people can walk all over you. I've had problems with this. I got over it because I know that it ruins a lot of stuff that happens around me, a lot of relationships that I've had with people, and it's not great. I think just knowing that standing on my own opinion is what makes me stay so grounded and not have to over-explain. You know, if you're sorry, but it doesn't mean you gotta, you know, tell why. Or, you know, an opinion. You know, you don't need to over-explain an opinion to somebody because they don't like your opinion. I don't think that over-explaining is, in a sense, a bad thing when you're talking about why you like something. You know, you can love something and explain why you love something. I'm just saying when you're doing it for nonsense. You know, somebody doesn't like your opinion, so let's just go on a rant about why, you know, it's a good thing. Or why they should like the thing that you don't like. Why you should tell this person that what you're doing is a bad thing. That's what I'm saying. Over-explaining is not great. Oversharing is even worse, and it stems from one another. It's very, like I said, boundaries. I've been in a situation, and I'm going to just say it right now, where people will say their opinion 10, 15 million times over. I wouldn't like it. And then I'd be over-explained to why I should be liking this one thing. And, you know, it makes me upset. So I go and I explain my reasoning of why I should feel the way I do. And that's where I'm saying that's the boundaries crossed right there. That's the oversharing. Why? Why should I need to feel like I'm proving somebody wrong that already has an opinion? That's what I think I've learned in the last year that's really helped me, honestly. There's been times when, you know, somebody says an opinion, I say, oh, that's cool. That's it. Boom. Done. It's not just the opinion, like I said, it's a bunch of things. And, you know, just with family, you know, sometimes they say, oh, I don't want, you know, parents is like where the trauma comes from, right? Because you're so caught up in, I'm so caught up with trauma. You know, you don't want to say no because it'll cause a problem, or you know, you don't want to say no because of any type of reason. But let's say I say no, and then they say, why not? I don't need to over-explain. I don't need to tell them why. I really don't. I just say no, because that's where the boundaries are being crossed, and that's where I need to step in. You need to step in and be like, no, that's it. I think I like that. I like just saying no. The one time I'm going to share my one experience where I felt like I did it for the first time was last year. I was at a concert and this one person asked me for see my shirt. Don't get me wrong. It was definitely an over exaggeration, but I just said straight up, no, I don't want to. That was it. But if it was any other time, I feel like I would have had to say no, I don't really want to because of this and this and this. But I just said no. And it felt great. I felt great. Was I a little bit of an asshole? Yes, because I didn't know how to do it. And I didn't have, let's say, practice of how to say no and not to overshare. But I did it. I felt great. I'm not oversharing now. If you're like, oh, you know, Draxley, you're freaking making a YouTube video. No, I'm doing this because I like to help people. And I just want to share my experiences and let this channel just be a helping, but also just a knowing for me that I'm doing and getting better. Oversharing has been a very, very hard part in my life, over explaining. I feel like it stems from trauma, PTSD, and a bunch of things, but it can be solved and it can be basically okay. I've been Draxley. Hopefully this has helped you. Thanks for watching.